immediately. In the sense, the goods will be transferred from seller to buyer immediately. So after making all the installment, then only it is treated as what? The goods has been sold. So before making the payment itself, the goods will be transferred from higher seller to the higher purchaser. So this is the actual value of that particular goods or asset is known as what? Cash price. Hello everyone, I am Harshita, lecturer, Department of Commerce, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. Today we are in the first session of Unit 3 of Financial Accounting 2, that is Hire Purchase. So your Unit 3 is all about hire purchase. So in this unit you are going to study about meaning of hire purchase and what are the accounts that has to be prepared during hire purchase system and who are the parties involved in hire purchase system. Now we shall directly move on to the concept, that is accounting for hire purchase system. Now what is this hire purchase system? So before going through the explanation, I'll give an example so that you can clearly understand what is this hire purchase system. Now there are two parties, A and B. So these are the two parties and A is having an asset and A wants to sell the asset to B. For example, we take this asset as laptop. So the asset is laptop. Now A is having that laptop and A wants to sell that laptop to B. Now A is called as what? Hire seller, or is also called as hire vendor. Now, the person who wants to sell an asset is known as hired seller or hire vendor, and the person who wants to purchase that asset is known as hire purchaser. Now, A is having that laptop and A wants to sell that laptop to B, that is hire purchaser. Now, laptop transfers to B, that is on the date the seller transfers the assets to B. So, B has to make some payment. So B makes the payment. So he will not make full payment. So under hire purchase system, the payment is not made in full. So he will make some payment which is known as down payment. So the payment which is made by B is known as down payment. For example, the value of laptop is 50,000. So the value of laptop is 50,000. So it is been transferred to B and B will not pay the full amount on date the goods has been transferred or the asset has been transferred. So he will make the payment. How much? He will make, for example, he will make 10,000. So remaining 40,000. So that 10,000 is known as what? Down payment. That is the payment which is made on the date of transfer of asset is known as down payment, and remaining 40,000 which has to be paid to B. So this payment, that is 40,000, will be paid in the form of installments. So this 40,000 will be made in the form of installments. So installment will be paid by the hire purchaser to hire seller in the form of installment along with interest. So here installment includes principal plus interest. So this 40,000 will be divided into number of installment. Along with the installment, here the hire purchaser has to pay interest also. So this is about hire purchase system. Here the ownership of the goods, that is ownership of the asset, transfers from hire seller to hire purchaser. Only hire purchaser makes the last installment. So here the ownership transfers. So till the last installment is made by the hire purchaser, till then ownership lies in the hands of hire seller. Only after payment of last installment, the ownership will be transferred from hire seller to hire purchaser. So this is about hire purchase system, where the payment is not made immediately, but the payment is made in the form of installments along with interest. But on the date of transfer of that asset, the amount which is paid is known as what? Down payment. Now go through the explanation here. Hire purchase system is a system of purchase under which possession of the goods is offered by the seller to the buyer immediately. In the sense, the goods will be transferred from seller to buyer immediately. That is, on the date of transaction itself, the goods will be transferred, but the ownership doesn't transfer. So here, the goods will be transferred from hire seller to hire purchaser immediately, on the condition that the price of the goods should be paid by the purchaser in a certain installment. So this I have told you. So here the payment is not made immediately, but the payment is made in the form of installments, and the legal ownership of the goods will be passed on the hire purchaser only after the last installment is paid. So here I have told you the ownership of goods, that is transfers from hire seller to hire purchaser only if the last installment is paid. Until that, ownership will be in the hands of hire seller itself. Under this system, if the buyer fails to pay any installment, the seller has a right to take back the goods. For example, now, so if you take this example itself, A have sold laptop to B and the value of laptop was 50,000, where B paid only 10,000, which is called as down payment on the transfer of asset. Remaining 40,000 has to be paid in the form of installment. For example, if B have paid 20,000 and the remaining 20,000 he failed to pay the installment. If you take the same example, now A is the hire seller, he has transferred the goods to B, that is hire purchaser, that is laptop. So the amount of or the value of laptop is rupees 50,000, but B has paid only 10,000 as down payment. Remaining 40,000 which has to be paid by B in the form of installment. Suppose B pays 20,000 and remaining 20,000 he fails to pay the installment. In such cases, A has the right to take back that asset from B. So A has the right to take back the laptop from B. So this is about hire purchase system, where under this system, if the buyer, that is B, fails to pay any installment, the seller has a right to take back the goods. So this is about hire purchase system. Now let us see what are the conditions to be considered during this hire purchase system. So first is payments will be made in installments. So this I have told you. So on the date of transfer, he will pay some amount, that is some percentage of the value of goods, and rest of the amount has to be paid in the form of installments. Each installment will be treated as hire, so that if default is made in the payment, the seller will be entitled to take away and the goods without compensating the hire purchaser in any way. So I have told you, so the other rest of the amount will be made or paid in the form of installment. If the hire buyer fails to pay any one of the installment, then hire seller has a right to take back that goods. Next, in all the installment, if all the installments are paid, the goods will be treated as sold. So after making all the installment, then only it is treated as what? The goods has been sold, and the right of property of the goods passes to the purchaser. So after making last installment, then only the ownership transfers from hire seller to hire purchaser. That is, after making the last installment, then only this ownership transfers from hire seller to hire purchaser. So these are the conditions that has to be remembered during hire purchase system. Now let us see what are the features of hire purchase system. So if you know the meaning of hire purchase system, it is very easy to recall all the features of hire purchase system. Let us see what are the features. So the first one is, there is an agreement between the seller and the purchaser. So the payment as well as the possession of the goods takes place with an agreement between the hire seller and hire purchaser. So there should be an agreement. And the second point is, the possession of the goods immediately possesses from the seller to the buyer. So here, immediately, so before the last installment is paid, so on the date of purchase itself, the possession or the goods transfers from hire seller to the purchaser. So possession is nothing but the transfer of goods. So here the transfer of the goods immediately takes place on the date of purchase itself before making the last installment. So before making the payment itself, the goods will be transferred from higher seller to the higher purchaser. But when the ownership will transfer, the legal ownership of the goods is passed on to the higher purchaser only after the last installment is paid. So this ownership transfers only after the last installment is paid, but the transfer of the goods takes place on the date of purchase itself. So goods will be transferred earlier. Later on, the ownership will be transferred only after the last installment is paid. So in this system, risk lies in the hands of seller. So here the risk lies in the hands of seller. So the seller thinks that the installment will be paid in full. With that belief, he transfers the goods. So the risk lies in the hands of seller, because with that belief, he transfers the goods completely to the higher purchaser. So here the risk lies in the hands of higher seller. So in this system, the buyer is like a bailee, because he does not get the full ownership of the goods. So he'll get the ownership only after the payment of last installment. And if any of the installment is not paid, then the goods will be transferred to higher seller itself. So the goods will be given back to higher seller itself. So here he acts as a bailee. Next, in this system, the buyer can exercise the option of return. So here, the buyer can exercise the option of return also. So if he doesn't want the good, he can return that goods by having an agreement between the higher seller. Next, what are the terms used in hire purchase transaction? Let us see what are the terms that are used in hire purchase transaction. So these are the main terms which are used. So the first one is hire purchaser. Now who is an hire purchaser? One who gets the possession of the goods is known as what? Hire purchaser. So he is a person who has obtained possession of the goods from the owner of the goods under hire purchase agreement. So one who gets the goods is known as what? Hire purchaser. Now if you take, there are two parties, X and Y, and X is a hire seller and Y is a hire purchaser. Now who is an hire purchaser? One who gets the possession of the goods. So if the goods is transferred to Y, then Y is what? Hire purchaser. But what Y will do? Y will not make the payment immediately. So he will make some payment, and after rest of the payment will be made in the form of installment. So here Y is called as what? Hire purchaser. One who gets the goods, one who gets the possession of the goods is called as hire purchaser. Then who is hire vendor or hire seller? Now the person who transfers the goods is known as hire seller or hire vendor. So he is a person who sells goods on the basis of hire purchase agreement. So the agreement between these two parties are known as hire purchase agreement, and one who sells the goods on a hire purchase agreement is known as hire seller. Now here X is a hire seller. Then what is a cash price? It is a price at which goods may be purchased for cash. For example, the value of mobile phone is rupees 25,000. So the actual value of mobile phone without including interest is known as what? That is cash price, the actual value of the goods. Now, this goods will be transferred to hire purchaser, and the purchaser will make payment in the form of installment along with interest. So this amount does not include interest. So this is the actual value of that particular goods or asset is known as what? Cash price. So after adding interest, the value will increase, right? So because plus interest. So here the actual value of goods plus interest will be added for that. So that is not a cash price. Before adding interest, that is known as what? Cash price. That is, in the sense, the actual value of goods or asset. So it is a price at which goods may be purchased for cash. So if you are making payment in the form of cash, then what is the value of good? That value is known as what? Cash price. Now what is this higher purchase price? So it is a total amount payable by the higher purchaser under higher purchase agreement in order to purchase the property. It is actually the cost price plus interest. So this is known as what? Higher purchase price or higher price. Now for example, there are two parties, M and N, and they are having an agreement which is known as what? Higher purchase agreement. Now M is a higher seller and N is a higher purchaser. Now M has transferred the asset. For example, car. M has transferred the car to N of rupees 10 lakh. So the price of car is what? 10 lakh. And N pays 1 lakh as down payment. N has paid 1 lakh as down payment. So the total value of car is 10 lakh and N has paid 1 lakh. Remaining 9 lakh will be paid in the form of installment. Now what is this? Along with payment of installment, he will pay. So this 9 lakh will be paid in the form of installment, plus along with installment he has to pay interest also. So this installment amount plus interest is known as what? Higher purchase price. Then what is cash price? The total value of car, that is the actual value of car, that is 10 lakh is what? 10 lakh is cash price. But what is higher purchase price? The actual value of car plus interest. So it includes interest also, that is known as what? Higher purchase price. So it is a price which is given by the higher buyer or higher purchaser to higher seller along with installment amount plus interest is called as higher purchase price. Next, what is down payment? So it is a price which is paid by the higher purchaser to the vendor, that is higher seller, at the time of agreement. So at the time of agreement and taking the possession of the goods. Now if you take the same example here M have transferred car to N and the value of car is 10 lakh but N doesn't make 10 lakh. So he pays only 1 lakh on the date of purchase. That is on the date when the car is being received by N, on the same day he will make some amount that will be in the percentage, that will be in the percentage of the total cash price. So it may be 10% or 15%. So the total cash price into 15% amount which is paid by the higher purchaser on the possession of the goods, on the date of possession of the goods. So when he is receiving that goods, so he will give some amount which is known as what? Down payment. Now here the worth 10 lakh worth car is been transferred to N and N have not payment whole amount 10 lakh. So he makes 1 lakh payment on receiving of that car. So on the date of receiving of car, he makes 1 lakh as payment. So this 1 lakh is called as what? Down payment. Now it is a price which is paid by the higher purchaser to higher vendor at the time of agreement and taking the possession of the goods. So when he is going to receive goods, he has to pay certain percentage of amount of the cash price. So that amount is known as what? Down payment. Now who is an hirer? Hirer is a person who obtains possession of the goods from the higher vendor under the higher purchase agreement. Now here higher purchaser is also called as hirer. Now who is an hirer? Hirer is a person who obtains possession of the goods. Now N is obtaining the possession of the goods, that is car, from the higher vendor, that is M, higher vendor is M, under the higher purchase agreement. So it means that higher purchaser is also called as hirer. Now let us see what is the difference between sales and higher purchase. Now if you see the ownership, so the first one is on the basis, so this is basis. So on the terms of basis, that is on ownership, let us see what is the difference between sale and higher purchase. Now if you see the sale, ownership is transferred at the time of purchase itself. So on the date of purchase itself, so the ownership will be transferred from higher seller to higher purchaser. For example, here there are two parties, L and M, and L is a seller, M is a purchaser. Now they have purchased goods worth rupees 5,000. Now immediately M will make payment to L. Now here what happens, the ownership is completely transferred to M. Now M becomes the owner of that particular goods because M has completely made the payment, that is in the form of sale. That is, in sale, the ownership immediately transfers from hire seller to hire purchaser. But when compared to hire purchase system, and a hire purchase system, ownership is transferred only after the last installment is paid. Whereas in sale, it is immediately transferred to the hire purchaser, whereas in installment, it is ownership will be transferred only after payment of last installment. And the second point is governing act. Now this is reverse. Sale is governed by Sale of Goods Act 1930. So here sale is governed by Sale of Goods Act 1930, whereas hire purchase, so this should come here, that is hire purchase is governed by Hire Purchase Act of 1972. So it is governed by the Act of 1972, that is Hire Purchase Act of 1972. So hire purchase is governed by the Act of Hire Purchase Act of 1972, whereas sales is governed by Sales of Goods Act of 1930. So here there are two different governing bodies where sale is governed by the Act of Sale of Goods Act 1930, whereas hire purchase is governed by the Act of Hire Purchase Act of 1972. Now coming to the third one, payment. So how the payment is made in sale? So in case of sale, payment of price is generally made in lump sum. So on a whole, they will make the payment. So when a goods has been transferred, so they will make the payment immediately in lump sum amount. In the sense, the total amount will be paid to the hire seller. Whereas coming to the installment, in the case of hire purchase system, the price is always made in installment. So in a hire purchase system, the payment is always made in installment, whereas coming to sale, it is always paid in lump sum. Next, fourth one is dispose of goods. So how the goods has been disposed. So in the case of sale, buyer can dispose of the goods in any way he likes. So in the case of sale, so after the goods has been sold, so the buyer can use that goods or he can dispose that good as he likes. Whereas coming to hire installment, but hire purchase system, that is, here the buyer under hire purchase agreement has no right. So he has no such right before he becomes the owner on payment of last installment. So before he becoming the owner of that particular asset or goods, he cannot do anything with that particular asset or goods. So he can't dispose that goods. He don't have right to dispose the goods. Whereas in sales, it can be used as per the wish of the hire purchaser. Whereas in hire purchase system, so here the goods cannot be used as per the wish of hire purchaser until he makes the last installment. Now coming to the next one, fail in payment. So suppose the amount which has to be paid to the hire seller has been failed. Then what happens in case of sale? So in the case of sale, on credit, the seller can sue the buyer for the payment of price outstanding. So here, if any amount is unpaid by the purchaser, then in case of sale, so here the hire seller can sue the buyer. So here the hire seller has a right to sue the buyer in case of sales. Whereas coming to hire purchase, but a seller under hire purchase system can take back the goods. So here he cannot sue the buyer, but he can directly take back the goods if the buyer has not made the payment in the form of installment. So he can take back the goods in case of default by the buyer in payment of any installment. So here I have told you the payment will be in the form of installment only. Whereas in sale, he can sue the buyer in the court, whereas in hire purchase, so he cannot sue, but he can directly take back the goods. Next, buyer's position. So the buyer's position is like that of a owner in case of sale. So in case of sale, buyer's position will be like a owner. Whereas in case of hire purchase, the position of an hire purchase is like that of a bailee. So he will not become the owner of that particular goods until he makes the last payment. So he will act like a bailee in respect of the goods until he becomes the owner. So he can just use that goods until he makes the payment. So he will not become the owner of that goods. Next, payment of interest. So in case of sale on immediate cash, the price does not include any interest. So there is no interest. So if the sale is made by paying immediate cash, there is no interest. Whereas coming to hire purchase, and a hire purchase, the installment includes interest. So this I have told you. So installment also includes interest. So here principal is equal to installment plus interest. So here principal is equal to installment plus interest. So here, whereas in sale it does not include any interest, whereas coming to hire purchase system, it includes interest along with installment amount. So in my next session, I am going to discuss about journal entry in the books of hire purchaser. So you have to prepare journal entries in the books of hire purchaser as well as hire seller. So in my next session, we shall see what is the format for the journal entries in the books of hire purchaser, and also we shall solve a problem on hire purchase system where we have to prepare journal entries in the books of hire purchaser. So in today's session, we have learned about hire purchase system, what are the conditions that has to be made during hire purchase system, what are the features of hire purchase system, and difference between hire purchase as well as sales. So in my next session, I am going to solve the problem on hire purchase system where we have to prepare journal entries in the books of hire purchaser. So my dear students, hope you have understood the session. See you all in my next session. Till then, take care. Thank you.